It started off with a bang right here, and it lasted hours, span across two stakes. Both first here at 1-2, and then 2-4. We moved from one table to a couple of tables, and got pretty chippy, um, and I think had a lot of interesting uh, theoretical spots, mostly to do with profiling your opponent and then um, adjusting to their tendencies. So first hand I stack off with ace six offsuit, and in the fourth hand I get all my chips in the middle with a couple of fives. I lose both hands, and neither one of those plays is standard for me. Um, so why did I do it? Well, it had to do with my assumptions about my opponent, which I want to get into a little bit. Right here in the third hand, I do make it 52 on the 5 deuce. He's now 3-bet me twice to different sizes, um, and I think I did this probably more to be cute than anything else. It's not really that good of a play. Um, Here's the 5-5 hand where I get 4-bet myself and decide to put it in and lose a flip to ace king. Okay, so here's what's going on here. For this video, I wanted to play someone who I thought was a decent heads-up opponent, and so I chose to play a regular who was sitting by himself in the middle of the day at the heads-up tables. Um, some assumptions I make about people sitting at a heads-up table alone, not getting action from other regulars, uh, are that they're decent, or the other regulars would be playing them, um, and they're capable of multiple levels of thinking. So adjustments should play a key in the match. Um, what about his impressions of me? Well, from his perspective, an unknown sat down with him and put 100 big blinds in before the flop in 2 of the first 4 hands with ace rag and a small pocket pair. So he's got to view me as a bit of a loose cannon at the least, probably just a maniac fish. That's going to lead to some adjustments on his part. The first one, I think, is pretty obvious. It's going to be he's going to bluff a bit less. When the big money goes in, he's going to be bluffing less against me than might be his normal tendency, given that I have shown a willingness to put my chips in either as a bluff or just with a weak hand. So big bluffs are likely to blow up on him a little bit more often than against a normal opponent. So he should probably bluff less. Here we see maybe the first adjustment that he made, which is with all the pre-flop action that was going on between us, now he started opening some of the time to just 2 times the big blind. And he checked this one back and then folded. So initially I'm going to make an assumption that when he opens it 2 times the big blind, he wants to play a smaller pot. He probably has a speculative hand that he'll call a 3-bet with, but he doesn't want that big a percentage of the stacks to go in pre-flop if he can help it. Therefore, his range is going to be weighted towards smaller cards a little bit. Although I certainly assume he's capable of mixing it up in this regard. So, here he min raises again and then bets the minimum, but he calls a check raise, and a lot of cards that completed draws came off. I could bet again here. It wouldn't be unreasonable, but I just decided to give up because I don't expect to get a lot of credit from him in this spot, and he could easily have completed a draw himself there, or made a strong made hand on that card. Okay, back to the assumptions or the adjustments that I expect him to make. Less bluffing overall, and then with marginal made hands like top pair, weak kicker, and down, and as we get deeper, even good one pair hands like over pairs and top pair, good kicker. I think most pros at this level will go the conservative route against the maniac and tend to give those hands up a bit easier to a lot of pressure, um, or not inflate the pot at least themselves with those hands, because they see me as presenting a wide target who will get the money in bad if when they just bet their strong hands straightforwardly. So um, so they don't need to risk me doubling up and quitting, or the tilt factor of losing a big pot with a marginal hand, and so they'll tend to give those up a little easier. I'll come back to that hand with the 8s and 7s in just a moment. The other route they might go, though, in terms of the adjustments, is to just say this guy stacks off very, very light. I'm going to stack off lighter than normal, but not as light as him, and be willing to accept the variance. Okay, so here I play a draw passively and get there on the flop. Play it passively on the flop. I decide to lead out on the turn, and when I get raised, again, I don't expect this guy to be doing that much bluffing against me until I prove that I can lay anything down in a big pot. So when he raises, I think he has a legit hand. He's willing to go with it, and the choice is clear. He does have a legit hand. I have to admit, I'm a little bit sad to see that I have to chop that pot. With the 7-8 hand, I flopped middle pair after just calling out of the blinds, and turn 1 check check. The river I made 2 pair, which was certainly going to be the best hand, and so I bet very large, almost full pot for value, since if he's taking a pot control line, I expect him to be willing to call up to a pot size bet with any pair, 7s through kings, and possibly even with ace high. Here we have a re-raise pot, but it started with a min raise, so the stacks are a little deeper. To be a little more cautious, but I really wasn't planning on abandoning this hand at any point, even though a fairly bad card came on the turn for me. And I make a standard 2/3 and 3/4 pot value bet, and it doesn't get called. This hand is fairly interesting. I make a continuation bet, and when you get called on that board, it's probably good to give up a fair amount of the time or take the free card. But I turn a double belly buster, and in keeping with what I said about him playing more cautious with marginal made hands, I don't expect to get check raised as often by one pair there. So I decide to fire another barrel and continue to build the pot. Now on the river, he checks again, and I tend to think he would bet out with a flush. So I think a flush is less likely than normal, and I decide to try to represent the flush. However, when you bet 3 streets as the preflop aggressor and the board keeps changing, gets scarier and scarier, it starts to get a little less believable. So I felt like I needed a little extra weight if I was going to bluff there, and I went with the overbet. That bet is almost double the pot, so it needs to be successful 2/3 of the time. In my experience, though, before you've been caught bluffing with an overbet, you get a ton of respect, and so I chose to go there. Here, I get 3-bet, and we're 200 big blinds deep, so I don't want to 4-bet ace-queen. He bets the flop and checks the turn, followed by a check raise. I don't love this spot, but I'm getting about 2-1, and I think a competent pro can show up with pair and open-ender or a diamond draw here, in addition to all the hands that beat me. So I don't feel too bad about stacking up with ace-queen. Certainly if it was me, I would probably take that line with 10-9, Jack-10, Queen-10, King-Queen, Ace-X of diamonds, and if I happen to have it, like Jack-X of diamonds, which was a pair of jacks and a diamond draw, as well as all of the straight and flush hands. In fact, I probably would be more likely to bet out if I made a big hand, just to fire again and expect to get raised on a draw a fair amount of the time. So I'm quickly down 3 stacks to this guy.